Welcome to the People, Property, Place podcast with me, your host, Matthew Watts, founder and managing director of Rockborn. This is a podcast where I share the stories, views, opinions and career journeys of the movers, shakers, innovators and leaders in the real estate industry. Welcome to the People, Property, Place podcast. Today we're joined by Michael Whitney, director at Areli Living. Set up in 2020 by Andrea Vanni in a 50-50 joint venture with Invel Real Estate, Areli Living is making a push into the UK real estate market. Michael's experience spans direct investment, asset management and development of both residential and commercial real estate, and he has also got extensive experience across equity and debt funding, covering all asset classes. Michael, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Not at all. Well, look, we'll speak about Areli Living a little bit later on in the conversation, but a place that I would like to start is, how did you get into real estate?
So it's quite interesting. I actually fell into real estate many years ago. I thought I was going to join the Marines, and that's what I wanted to do. And I'd done officer training corps at university, and I was a reservist in the Marines, and I was getting ready to go off, and I needed a summer job and ended up getting a summer job as an estate agent in West London in Ealing, which was an interesting place to start. Quite enjoyed doing that and started to play more and more rugby. So ended up getting bigger. I was around 18, 19 at the time. And what happened was I quite enjoyed working in real estate and being an estate agent. I know it's a bit of a dirty word, but it was good fun. Then decided to carry on with that line, moved to Chiswick to a company called Farrow Sataria after about 6 weeks after the summer holidays. And that was it. Worked in Chiswick for about 6 months, then moved to Notting Hill Gate with the same company. And that's where I thoroughly enjoyed myself, buying and selling residential properties, mainly selling at lower levels and then building up to bigger houses and larger apartments.
And so you decided not to pursue the Marines? Kind of rugby took over?
Yeah. I think the comment was I did my test and I got a level 13 on my beep test, and I was the first one to drop out. And the guy pulled me to one side and said, "Look, we think you're really fit. You're fine, but you're just a bit too heavy. You need to lose some timber." And I kind of haven't since. So that kind of answered the question.
So you decided to kind of stay down that residential estate agency route. Did you feel that was a kind of a natural fit to your personality, or what was motivating you to do that?
Yeah, it was very easy. Yeah, it was a really easy job for me to do in terms of the fact, I don't care what people say to you. Sales isn't about selling things. Sales is all about connecting with people. And if you're saying you're going to do something, you do it. You're personable, and you can never force anyone to buy an apartment. They either like the apartment or they don't. Your job is to find the one that fits them best, that they love, and will move heaven and earth to buy, and make it as easy as possible for them to buy it. That is literally what your job is, not these kind of Wolf of Wall Street type sales tactics that you see people spouting. And actually, it meant that I was very efficient in what I did. So, we had a team, about 7 or 8 brokers in the office, and all we were doing was churning out sales after sales after sales. And if you can do that efficiently, it becomes quite an enjoyable job.
Yeah, and were you a bit of a social chameleon as well?
Yeah, so I think with that you have to learn to deal with different types of people and different people in different walks of life. From your landed gentry type buyer to your B-list pop star who's turned up, most probably still enjoying themselves from the night before, but have got £500,000 to spend on a 1-bedroom flat.
Yeah.
And, we're talking 20 years ago, 25 years ago. That was a lot of money in those days. So it was good fun.
And were you inherently motivated and financially driven at that stage?
We were at that stage because the first job I had, and that when I worked at Farrow's, you worked on a purely commission basis. Your basic salary would just about cover your car parking tickets that you get for Kensington and Chelsea, and not much else. So if you wanted to pay rent, put food on the table, you needed to start earning commission. So it was a very low base salary, plus a commission structure on top, which was fine. And that worked out quite well, but it motivated you to, you either do the job and you put the work in, or you go and find something else to do. It was quite a good opportunity. I think it was a real baptism of fire working in that environment. But I met some people there that I will call friends for life. Some that still work in the area. So if you're buying or selling in Notting Hill Gate and Kensington and Chelsea, there are some very good agents. Come and have a chat with me. I'll put you in touch with them.
You still got it.
Yeah, they're good guys. And also taught me some really good life lessons about how to be a self-starter, because you basically managed your desk. And this was before the time when you were allowed to have a laptop or a computer or answer emails. There was email, but we weren't allowed to have them. So what we'd have to do is we had cards where you'd write notes on for each person, and you go through your cards on a daily basis, work out who's buying, who isn't, who's already bought, if they found something, understanding all that info, very similar to what we do in commercial property on a daily basis. And it was a good building block.
And so what prompted you to move away from estate agency? Because, surely you're making some quite good money, and, probably looked across at your peers and maybe out earning them, giving you commission checks. And what prompted you to move away from that environment after 6 years or so?
So I think the change came to me at a point when things were changing in my personal life, and I wanted to do something that was a bit more professional. I kind of always sought a bit of kind of ratification that, yes, you're good at something, or you're doing something. And the environment I was in didn't really play to that. That was a lot of bravado that went around. So I remember I got speaking to a surveyor who was looking around one of the properties that I was sold, who was doing a buyer's report. And I was chatting to him, and he said to me, do you know what you need to do? He said, you should do surveying, maybe do like country estates or country houses. You'd really like that. Really. And I thought to myself, that'd be really good fun. But where do I go, to do? He said, well, what you need to do first is go to the Royal Agricultural College, which is now the Royal Agricultural University. Go and do a surveying degree there, and then you can become a surveyor. And that's where that's where Savills and all the big guys take their country homes teams from. It's like, okay. Yeah.
And was this guy a surveyor?
Yeah.
You said that to you.
He was a surveyor, turned up. He had a chocolate lab with him in the middle of Chelsea in his Land Rover. Archetype, barber jacket, green cords on.
Yeah.
He would have been straight out of an Enid Blyton type book. It was brilliant. So I thought, okay, why not? I sent a letter in, applied, got asked to go in for an interview. Literally after about 20 minutes into the interview, got on the subject of rugby, started talking. Oh yeah, the lecturer was a really big rugby fan. Oh, maybe you could come and play for us, and that was it. Got a place. I didn't have the grades to get in at the time. So he said to me, we know you've already done a degree, but your UCAS points technically aren't high enough.
Yeah.
So I was like, yes, it's because I did it over 10 years ago. It was a different benchmark. And they said, but we did. So I did a foundation year, passed all that, and then got onto my 3-year course, which allowed me to play rugby and enjoy myself for at 25, go and enjoy the West Country for a bit and understand a different walk of life.
Yeah. So you'd already done a degree. You'd been earning some good money. You wanted to kind of maybe become a little bit more professional, or kind of move into a career that you could see yourself in longer term. How was that going back to university and maybe not earning any money for those 3 years?
That wasn't too much of a problem, because I, built up a good nest egg from the work I had been doing. And I tell you what, I would advise anyone who's done a degree first time round when they were young to go back and do it again and see how much more fun they can have, because they know exactly what they're doing at every stage. So I had a really good time. I really enjoyed it. I was playing a lot of rugby at the time. I met a lot of great, fantastic people who've gone on to do some fantastic things. We've got restaurateurs, a lady who set up her own fashion label, which I won't name any names, but she's doing very well. We've got our alumni you wouldn't believe how long it was. Loads of property people, loads of people were Savills, Knight Frank. And so it was all very, very, very interesting stuff and a great experience.
They were probably 5 years younger than you?
Yeah. Well, some had done a couple of gap years, so there was a range of people on our course that were from someone who was maybe a year younger than me, to I was definitely the older statesman though. I didn't act like it, but I was. And there was someone who's a year younger, right down to 18-year-olds who literally had straight in. Their parents had said to them, "Look, no, you've got to go and study. You can't do a gap year. You can't." And because you've got to manage the farm, so
you need to go and get educated
chop,
before you're back here. So you did 3 years there, and then you landed at Deal Logic, is that right? So how did that come about, and what was the rationale into that role post-uni?
Well, that was just a product of the time. I'd worked at Hyper Real Estate Bank over the summer, because during my degree I got very friendly with one of my lecturers, mainly because I like Excel and he's a bit of an Excel geek. talked about maths and stuff. And he suggested that commercial property might be a better fit for me. Maybe don't think about country houses, think about commercial property. So we organised that I went to work for Hyper Real Estate Bank in their surveying team for the summer. And I was supposed to be going to apply to work for them, but then the GFC hit and they got taken over by the German government. So that's when that all stopped. And I kind of got a bit of a feeling for commercial property over that summer. So when I started back, all the people that had got jobs were being made redundant over that summer period. And I thought to myself, I just need to do something. So a friend of mine said, I'm working at this company. Would you like to come and work there? It's a part-time job, do a bit of filing. It's in the city. Well, sorry, it's in central London. I was living in West London at the time. And I said, yeah, why not? I need to do something. Can't just not. And while I'm looking for a job, then I'll do that.
Did you think at the time you could always go back to the estate agency, or did you kind of explore the country homes market as well?
Country homes market was dead. Everything literally was dead. All the people that got taken on by Savills from my peer group were a lot of them were let go.
So that door was properly
it was really shut for a lot of people. And I didn't really. I'm quite kind of single-minded. I'm going to do something. I'm going to focus on it and get it done. What I did was actually, a friend of mine that I worked with was running an estate agency in Notting Hill Gate. And I said to him, look, how about I work for you on a Saturday doing your viewings just to keep my eye in while things are going? And he said, yeah, sure, no problem. He goes, look, if you sell anything, I'll give you commission. I was like, don't worry about that. I just want to kind of keep things going. So I did that at a place called Bective Leslie Marsh, as it was at the time, for 4 or 5 weeks. And then while I was working at D-Logic, they started to say, you're quite analytical. Can you do some market analysis? And I ended up moving into a team that what it did was tracked, IPOs, equity transactions, debt market transaction, bond issuing, and identified trends, and then sent them to people like the FT and the Wall Street Journal with little bar charts that we pulled together. And they'd write a story off the back of that data, or they'll call us up saying, we think this is the biggest IPO to happen in 15 years. Have you got any data to corroborate it? Because it's pretty big. And we'll find some kind of stats that those guys could use. So did that for about a year. And then the market started to tease up a bit. And I got a few interviews came forward. And I managed to get one with a chap who was an asset manager on Savile Row. He was in a basement of Savile Row. And it was the oddest interview I've ever had. I said to my wife, this guy was going through a divorce. There was lots of stuff going on. I said to my girlfriend at the time, I said, this is really weird. So I'm either going to get offered a job on Monday, or he's going to ask me out to dinner. I'm just not quite sure how this went. And she laughed at me. So on Monday, he said, look, I'd love to offer you a job, but there's no salary, just commission.
And you've been there already, right?
I've been there. I'm like, that doesn't really work. I've got a mortgage. I've got things to pay. I've spent a lot of money over the university time. I've enjoyed myself. I didn't live like a student, so I need to start earning again properly. And I said, look, thank you very much. Love it. But because of this issue, he said, look, it's fine. I think you're brilliant. You need to be working for one of the big guys. I was like, oh, I appreciate that. He said, I'm going to introduce you to some people. Dinner might still be on the cards here. Let's see what happens. And he sent out an email to 4 guys who just happened to be head of Central London at CBRE, head of leasing at H2SO, as they were at the time, head of London at Colliers and Savills. And he BCC'd me on this email, wrote this glowing email about me, which was fantastic.
Having just met you?
Having just met me, which was quite bizarre. Someone's going on a limb like that. But I then chased it up. I said, look, give them a week and then you can chase them. So, okay. So I gave it a week and I literally picked up the phone, was chasing people's PAs for a couple of weeks. And the Colliers guy invited me in to have a chat. We sat down and had a chat. It was to do office leasing, and didn't quite work out. He's like, we haven't really got anything at the moment, but we'll see. And then Adam Hetherington at CBRE said, look, come in, let's have a coffee and we'll see what's going on. So, because I said to him, I said, look, I've had a few knockbacks. I just want some guidance on what I need to be doing, what I should be saying to people. He said, look, come in and see me. Arranged it with his PA. I went in and had a coffee with him. We sat down, we talked about development. Like, look, I love development. I've always wanted to do development. He said, do you want to be a developer? I was like, no, I actually quite like doing deals. So, because we might have something. So then Adam basically sent me in to see a guy called Adrian Bunnis, who was head of the city office for the development team, a guy called Jonathan Dick, and we sat down, had a chat, and I got offered a job. And, from having absolutely nothing, I was on a grad scheme at CBRE because they needed someone to fill a specific, someone who knew Excel, who could do the modeling, run around, someone they seem to go through graduates a lot in that team and break them.
Yeah.
And the graduates didn't want to go back to the team, so they were always struggling. They just lost someone who'd gone to become a developer, go client side. So yeah, and that was the start of an 8-year journey.
It's a rare skill set, I would say, to have someone with, it's quite a gregarious character who's quite hungry and deal orientated, schooled in an estate agency environment, but combined with the attention to detail and analytical ability, and maybe patience in terms of putting these graphs together and reading markets that you did at Deal Logic. So, marrying those two skills up.
Yeah, I most probably oversold my analytical skills a bit. When I first started, I quickly had to learn, because working for Adrian was a fantastic opportunity and a great learning curve. He was very good. Didn't have a lot of time, so if you asked you something, you needed to know the answer to it, and there'd be regular conversations where he said, "What was the IRR on that deal?" And we talked about it 3 weeks previously, and I'd had to, off the top of my head, know what it was, because he didn't have the time to look it up in his papers. And if you told him the wrong answer, he knew straight away.
That's funky.
Yeah,
that's not right.
Something's not right. And then he kind of let me into the little secrets about how you can roughly calculate what IRR is without doing the cash flow, those kind of things. So that kind of mental maths, which he was absolutely brilliant at.
And so this was kind of post GFC, as you said. You've landed almost like a bag carrier for a senior individual at CBRE.
100%.
And was the mindset at that time to need to kind of knuckle down and given this opportunity, I just want to learn as much as I can? Because were you educated at that stage from a commercial real estate perspective, all the L&T, property management, valuation, development, investment?
I'd done a bit of that stuff. So did a bit of landlord, what you normally do at university. We did a bit of property law, right, which covers Landlord and Tenant Act. You do a bit of tort, the different types of law, case laws that you need to remember, and all the rest of it. The stuff that all surveyors know when they first start, car hill, car bullock, smoke wall, all that kind of stuff, all those cases. But I hadn't really, understood the full, hadn't done a commercial real estate job. I knew how to value things just about, not competently, but to a very basic standard. I knew how to read over valuation reports because I'd done it for 6 weeks at Hypo, which is basically what I did at Hypo. I'd been round an office building a couple of times.
Yeah.
So that's where I started out from. And these guys were, the stuff they were working on were things like, first deal I got involved in was One Blackfriars. Work that had been taken into receivership from the Beethams. The scheme wasn't really deliverable. We had to do a load of planning work, had to work out loads of rights to lie, had to unpick some commercial decisions that had been made that weren't quite right and weren't suitable for the market because the market had changed, and then repackage it, bring it to the market and sell it, which we did. And we sold it to the Barclay Group. They built out a fantastic scheme. Then we do things like 80 Fenchurch Street, big office building, which Yard 9 have just finished for Partners Group, worked all that out. That was another receivership sale. The thing's broken. We do a bit more work around the planning, show people what the potential is, and then sell the asset. And then we did things like One Crown Place, where we were selling and we kind of convinced parties coming in, this is what the potential of the site is. Don't worry about what UBS has got planning for. This is what you could do with it. And we were so good at doing that once the party bought it, they then turned around and said, right, can you pitch to develop it out for us? You've had the idea. Why don't you tell us what you think? And we did that. And then I got involved on the commercial side of that. We brought in a DM who I got to watch. And that's when I really started thinking, do you know what? Development management might be the way forward.
Because the term development management is so broad. And you get the front-end development managers, you get the delivery development managers, you get all the different project teams and River 7. Is it 7? Or is it, how many, whatever it is in the different stages through, planning, design, etc., etc. Yeah. What part of that excited you? Or was it just the whole lot, just being able to take an asset?
I think
or a piece of land and create a
I think it's actually creating a legacy, like being able to go to someone. I did that. I built that building. That was my building. It was my idea, right? And I didn't do the physical building. I got someone to build it for me, but they came to me. We spoke about what needed to be done. The architect understood what the vision needed to be. And together we made this, we built this fantastic thing, but I was part of that. To me is something which really excited me and was part of that whole kind of push to go more into that world. And, I was an associate director at the time at CBRE. I was quite keen. I was pushing to become a director, and it was about that time. And I was thinking to myself, what do I want to do? And the guy we brought in was a guy called Henry Robinson, who now is a senior development manager at Derwent. And Henry had built the Crick Institute. And I remember walking around the Crick with him when he first joined to show us the type of things he'd done. And I was just so excited with it. And then he started talking about some of the technical problems that they had to overcome to, in fact, they got a tube line running underneath it, but they've got electron microscopes which have to sit on an air cushion so they don't vibrate because they're so sensitive. All that kind of stuff. Like, you know what? I love that kind of stuff.
So you're a bit of a geek.
I am a bit, yeah. Like I like to find technical solutions to things. I've always thought to myself, I'm a problem solver. That's the bit I'm good at. I might not know technically how to do something, but I will investigate lots of different ways of solving a problem. And it's about that can-do attitude. And that fitted really well in what Henry was doing. So, I worked quite closely with Henry, started to provide some commercial input as Henry, you won't mind me saying this, but when he started out, he was very much a construction person and then started to learn all the commercial sides of things. And, he did an amazing job at One Crown Place. I think he was involved even with selling the apartment. So, overseas, he kind of really embraced that and took the whole cradle to grave commercial and technical piece and brought it together. And I looked at that and thought, that's what I want to do. That's the type of thing I like.
So you'd sold these buildings, taken the development management piece, or won the pitch to be able to develop it out. Did it get to a stage where you actually wanted to move client side and take more responsibility? Or what was the key driver to kind of maybe move out of CBRE? As you said, you're chasing directorship, you're an associate director.
Yeah.
What was the key driver for you looking to change? And
I think I was starting to feel most probably a bit frustrated. I was ready to, I'm quite always trying to, right, on to the next thing. How are we going to do it? Where are we going to move to? I don't like sitting still for too long. And I'd always thought that I'd do that like from cradle to grave at CBRE because it was such a lovely family to work for, and we were like a family, I consider they are some of my best friends in the work industry. Other people that I worked with, we just caught up at Christmas. Some of us hadn't seen each other for 8 years. And they're such a great bunch of people. And I really loved working there. But I was kind of thinking, I need to think about what I want to do. What's the next step? How do I want to do it? And, someone approached me and said, look, there's a client side development role. Would you be interested in doing it? It's something that could fit your skill set quite well. They've already got a technical person, so they need the more commercially minded development surveyor, they call it. I said, but I'm an associate director. What do you mean? And they're like, no, it's all right. Don't worry. It'll be okay. And, that's when I moved and joined Frogmore. CBRE were very understanding. Frogmore was a client of theirs, so it worked out quite well. Jo Allen, who interviewed me, and Tim Allabone. Jo was ex-CBRE as well, and she kind of had a chat, took me under her wing, and had an absolutely fantastic time working there, doing some amazing projects and really got exposure. And got the opportunity to solve technical problems and learn the technical side of things from the senior development manager who I worked alongside. He was brilliant, at dealing with contractors and understanding exactly where the costs are going to run and what's happening and how to manage those projects. And I took on, a load of projects straight from the bat. We had a hotel in Southwark. We had a Notting Hill Gate estate where we were looking at what we're going to do with one of the buildings. We'd already kind of we were finishing out 2 office buildings, but do we want to do another office? Do we do residential? What do we do? Came up with the idea to do a hotel. And, that was quite a long journey because it takes quite a bit of time. And I was there, 4.5 years, just shy of 5. And it was really good fun. Went and secured planning for Stratford, which was a big mixed use scheme, which had residential, hotel, office, retail, right in the heart of Stratford, opposite the Olympic Park. Fantastic, 42-story tower, 21-story tower. So, it ticked every single development box you can imagine. It was like playing a bit Monopoly, but it was fantastic. And
so you joined the business and there were lots of different projects at various different stages.
Right.
For someone who, maybe listening to this, who doesn't know too much about development, can you just break down, like broadly speaking, what the different areas and different jobs within development are?
Yeah, so it depends where you work, because development is a bit of a murky world in terms of you have consultants that have done cost management. They do project management, which is basically corralling all the different consultants together together, managing what they're doing, making sure people are on budget, on time, that kind of thing. And then then you have what's known as a development manager. But the development manager comes from two separate worlds. So you will have development managers that have been development advisors. So basically, they've sat at CBRE, Savills, Knight Frank, and they have advised people on how to get the best out of their asset through the development process. And most of those guys might not have built many pieces, but they've gone and got planning for a lot of stuff. They've gone and done viability studies. They understand, how to extract as much commercial value from that site through a development process. And then they might have sold them or they might have passed it on to someone who's going to deliver it. And then you have the other hand, which is the development manager who has been a cost consultant or a structural engineer or something along those lines, and worked their way through, gone into project management, and then become a development manager. And at the point at which you come to development management, those two worlds collide head on. And you have people that call themselves development managers, and then you have people who call themselves development directors. And the development manager can be very construction focused, right? They know how to tender things. They know exactly who the right consultants are to use. They have dealt with technical issues before and worked around them. They know exactly what warranties need to go in place, which sometimes the guys who've done consultancy haven't got a clue about, right? So they do, how do they cover themselves to make sure that it's insured, it's warranted, and the risk liability is, because there's a lot of risk in development, gets passed through to the right people. And then what happens is you get those two types of development manager. And then what is expected is when you get to the point that you're a development director, you should know both. And that's where either the guys who have done the technical side have learnt the commercial side of things and stepped up, or not very often this happens, the guys who've done the consultancy side understand all the technical bits, the structural pieces, the warranties, all that kind of stuff, and then go in and become that development director.
And they need to do that just so they don't get bullshitted by the consultants.
Well, it's not just that. It's ultimately you're the development director. If something goes wrong with the project, it's down to you. You can lose. A lot of people will lose a lot of money on a development project. You can make a lot of money, but you can lose an awful lot because that asset isn't built. You've got liability, you've got collateral warranties that need to flow through. And, if you think about most developers, when they ask for a warranty, they're like asking for big PI sums of, 10 million each and every claim. If you're doing a project that's only got 15, 20 million of profit into it, and it's quite tight, and something goes wrong, and you haven't got the warranties in place, and that falls on you, you're stuck.
And so culminates in terms of this title as a development director. Where do you go from there? Or what other skills do you need to acquire to progress?
From development director, generally most development directors end up owning their own little businesses or going to be on the board doing less development. After you're a development director, you're doing more managing the piece. But really, development director, development executive is top of the kind of tree when it comes to the development side of things. Once you start to go into more of a more senior management position, and a lot of development directors or senior development director, however someone wants to badge it, and depending on company structure, they're quite up there because they're big decision makers. They've got to understand the implications of what's being done, and they've got to present that. A deal committee, they've got to present that opportunity, and they've got to identify what is a risk and what isn't a risk. And people that aren't development orientated will look at a development deal and think that point A is the risk. And the experienced development person will go, that's not your risk. Your risk is this thing over here that you haven't even thought about. And that's the bit that's going to bite you if it goes wrong. So that's what needs to be managed. Not this bit is, just it's an accepted risk. And it's all about managing risk.
These development projects, they often take a number of years.
Yeah.
There's no shortcut to fast tracking your career in this space. Is it literally just time, projects?
It's more project specific, right? You can work on multiple projects at the same time, but if you think about it, it's going to take you 2 years to get planning. If you've never got planning on something, how can you talk about going through the planning process? Because it's a real dark art. So you've got to take 2 years to get planning. Most buildings take at least 18 months to 2.5 years to build. No matter how big or small they are, they generally take around that kind of time to build. And then you might phase things. So you could have a 5-6 year project, and then you've got to think about leasing it up. At what point can you start getting tenants or doing sales? And that's the way it works.
And so for you were at Frogmore at the time. You had 2, 3, 4 projects you were working at various different stages.
Yeah. So when I joined Frogmore, I got given a hotel project that had just been acquired, and we were just starting the planning process. I then got brought into the project at Notting Hill Gate, which 2 buildings had already started construction and were being fitted out as prime offices. And we had a 3rd building, which we were kind of, what we're going to do with. So we had to go through the whole planning process, get it built. And, that's PCing February. And I started that process off 5 years ago, 6 years ago.
Yeah.
So you've got, it takes 2 years to plan. You've got to work through it. You've got public consultation events you need to do. You need to speak to the right political figures to get support, because development is the most emotive word when it comes to a community that you can ever think about. And everyone has a view, whether it's right or it's wrong, everyone has a view. A lot of it is communicating actually the reality, not the view that a lot of people have about projects you're doing.
When you talk about development, do you talk about retrofit, or do you talk about kind of a knockdown and rebuild? Or does it cover everything?
It covers everything. It can. So you get a lot of private equity guys, right, that say, oh, we do development. And what they do is they refit or refurb a building. Now, that's a skill set within itself, because there's a lot of things that get hidden behind those walls. But when you start pulling it off, you've got to deal with it. You don't get certainty about costs. You don't get certainty about actual what work needs to be done, because you don't know until you start pulling it apart. So that is, I would say that is development as well, but it's a different type of development, different type of skill set. And you hear these guys go, oh, we don't do development, but we do heavy refurb.
And they kind of badge it under an asset management badge rather than a development badge, but actually it's incredibly intensive.
Yeah, hugely intensive. And to their investors, they're saying, oh, it's just, that's just investment. Oh, why is that? Well, because we've still got income passing, and I've done that in the past where we still keep the retail going to keep an income running on the project.
So developments, as we've spoken about, take a long time, and there's lots of different stages. You were at Frogmore just under 4 years. Did you complete any of those projects that you started on? And then what was the kicker, or what was the reason why you left Frogmore to go and move to head of development at Landi?
Yes, I did finish a few of those projects. I had a retirement village in Southampton that we PC'd and finished. I had a hotel in Southwark, the Premier Inn, which is, when you speak to the guys at Frogmore, absolutely love it. It's one of their best deals. But luckily, we'd sold that before we even started building it.
To de-risk it?
Yeah. And also to get the right kind of returns, because our capital is expensive. And that's the other part of being a development director. You've got to understand, how does the capital stack work? Where's cheap capital come into the equation for your really expensive capital to take the risk to go and get the planning and start the construction? That's always quite interesting. So there was quite a few projects that we managed to finish in that period.
So you worked across a few different asset classes. Broadly speaking, is the skill set the same, whether you're dealing with a hotel, later living scheme, central London office, or are there kind of nuances?
I think the skill set's the same, but I think people might not know what the skill sets are. So the skill sets you need to be a good development manager is you need to be able to think quickly and rationally about what you're doing. You need to be able to problem solve while moving through a project. Always have one eye on what the exit is and where you're going. Understand the market around it. So that could be applied to anything. It doesn't matter what sector you're in. Those kind of 5 things are the 5 things that you need to be a good DM or development director, right? And most important thing, where you don't know something, you need to be able to know where to go and find that information out and very quickly get yourself up to speed on it. I talked about the project in Southwark. When we took that on board, there was a number of issues with that. We bought it, we had a great idea as to what we wanted to do, and then a load of things came out of the woodwork. The water table was too high in Southwark to be able to put basement in. So how do we sort that out? The rights to lights issues. The local authority planners didn't want to give us consent for a typical shape hotel. So we had to fit it within a residential type kind of structure. We did all of that and we worked out solutions. We saved money on the basement by making the basement more regular shape, where it was originally designed to follow the footprint of the buildings that are connected together. We raised the building slightly and reduced the floor levels slightly so that we could fit within a rights to light envelope, but also above the water table so we can put the basement rooms back in.
So problem solving, thinking ahead, knowing where to find something if you don't know it. And I guess that kind of comes down to your network as well, and probably professional advisors that you appoint. What was the key reason why you left Frogmore and took up the role as head of development at Landi?
So I left Frogmore during the pandemic. Things had slowed down quite a bit, but also the type of assets that we were taking on were less development intensive. And I was kind of really keen to make a change and move on to doing more larger placemaking type development. And the guys at Landi, who are great guys, came along and said, look, we're looking to push more into regeneration, and we'd like to kind of understand, we want someone on board who can understand where capital stack sits in development and how to make these things happen, because a lot of the assets assets that they deal with are, community shopping centres.
Yeah.
Asset values aren't huge there. GDVs aren't massive.
Well, they've just been hammered, haven't they?
Just year on year of getting pummeled with the retail stick, being killed by out of town kind of shopping centres, taking away from the town centre, and it becomes the forgotten piece. Rates still being very high in those locations. It means you can't get tenants in, or the tenants you do get in won't pay rent, they'll only pay rates and service charge. So that sector's all been hammered. So they were trying to find what's the new solution for the new town centre. Mark Robinson, Morgan Garfield, two very clever guys. Morgan's, ex-Deutsche Bank. Mark is an ex-retail agent who's now chair of the High Street Commission. And they are super committed guys it's about social impact and making a change, and how do we make these things happen. So I joined them to kind of try and facilitate that happening. And, they've had a lot of success doing that. They're doing stuff up in Blackpool now. They're doing stuff in Liverpool. And that was really, really interesting kind of chapter. It was only a short chapter for me, but I came along to try and make that work and facilitate and make that happen. And, they're doing a fantastic job in that. And I'd say that they are really committed to town centre regeneration for those kind of community assets.
So taking those assets that were once a beating heart, but for whatever reason, they've been absolutely hammered, and taking these massive sites and repurposing them, carving them up, changing the use, and making them fit for purpose moving forward.
Yeah, and they do that from a very asset management strong basis, right? They're very good asset managers, so they know how to run these town centres. So that was really good fun doing that. It wasn't quite right fit for me in terms of, I enjoyed it, but it's quite challenging because the GDV isn't there. You really need someone to step in and almost write down the value of the asset to nothing to start again. And some of these assets are still clinging on to some existing use value. And I kind of had to think to myself about what I really wanted to do. And someone came along and said to me, look, I know you work at Landy, they're great guys, but would you consider doing more central London stuff and doing a bit of financing in with development as well? I said, well, let's have a conversation, talk about it. And that's how I ended up moving to Areli Living.
So Areli Living, like I said at the top of this, Andrea Vanni, he set up Areli Real Estate with Rob Ticknell, who's ex-head of development of Battersea Power Station. This is a spin-off, right? And I know that the name, in and around when this is getting released, is going to be changed to something else. So we'll wait with bated breath to see what the rebrand is. And Areli Living is slightly misleading because it's not just a kind of a living or residential focused business. Can you tell me a little bit about Areli Living as it is right now, and maybe what the plans are for the future?
So Areli Living is a private equity platform, really. And we do two fundamental things. We do direct development ourselves, or we provide debt to developers, people that require some mezzanine financing from to achieve typical private equity returns.
15% plus geared IRR returns, 1.5
that kind of level, but it all comes down to what the different
source of capital and return.
No, it depends. It's project specific, right? So we will look at so many different projects. We step in to provide mezzanine funding for hotels, residential projects, office projects. We will cover the whole commercial sector, and generally, where we come in is where there's a cost overrun that needs to be funded. And we'll come in and we'll provide 30, 40, 50, 100 million of equity on a mezz debt, for a couple of years till you can get the project finished. And the risk profile of each project will determine the pricing.
Yeah. Someone who doesn't know or isn't familiar with the term capital stack, can you just run through the different pieces of the capital stack and what they mean?
So you've got two different parts of the capital stack, right? You've got your debt side, which is your loans that people take, and then you've got your equity side. And if I talk about the debt side first, you have a senior loan, which is normally the lower rates that you could get from a bank or a typical lender. But if you need more than that 50, 60%, those are coming down, those percentages at the moment, which is why more people are going to the mezzanine piece, which is the piece that sits above it. And that's more expensive because it gets paid back after the senior gets paid. So what happens is, once you pay people back, the first person you have to pay is HMRC, then you pay your senior lender, then you pay your mezzanine lender. Then you get into the equity stack. stack. And in the equity stack, you've got, these are the people that put their own money into a project. And you can have a pref equity position, which is a preferred equity position, which means it gets paid back first. And then once that's paid back, you pay back the rest of the equity. And that can be, as a, main investor or a junior investor, and everyone gets paid back either on a different kind of basis, depending on how the deal was structured. And when I talked earlier about the equity stack and where people come in, if you are a developer and you use expensive money from, say, private equity or your own equity, you put that in first. Then what you can do is you can swap out your money once you've got planning and started building, got a fixed price contract, to an end investor who wants to own it long term that will charge you a cheaper rate than your money does. So then you do that midway through your project and you're just swapping out the equity position on the project. So that's kind of very high level how the equity stack works.
Yeah. And so you, as a business, one of the strings of Areli Living at the moment is providing mezzanine debt and pref equity to developers.
Yeah. So depending on the project, we can provide the mezzanine, which we call mezz. We can provide a mezz to a sponsor, or we can provide them with a pref equity position which sits behind. But we need to know that there's enough money in the project and that it's the right kind of project. So a lot of the stuff that we look at now are very high-end residential projects, kind of super ESG compliant offices, 5-star hotels, all those things that have enough headroom in them that they can afford to take it's actually more accretive to them to still take our money instead of putting some of their own back in.
And it enables them to take their money and go and get another project. But also, given how selective you are about your projects, you want to make damn sure that you can get your money back one way or another, right?
Yeah. But the beauty about us is, we develop stuff ourselves. So like I said to you earlier, we know what a risk is, and we know if something is actually a risk or it isn't a risk. So we can look at things in a slightly different way to how maybe a traditional bank might look at something. So we're a traditional bank, we're like, oh no, that looks really risky. We'll look at it and go, actually, that's not the problem. The problem's this bit over here. If we can kind of sort this bit out, then actually we think it's a good project. Go ahead.
So as a business, you've got those two pots. You'll look at direct investment and development yourself, and then you'll also lend capital to parties as well.
Yes.
You touched on, luxury hotels, living schemes. What other asset classes would you look at? And in terms of locations, what kind of projects?
It's easier to say what we wouldn't look at, because we'd look at everything apart from, I think where we're not going to be doing is we're not going to be going to, big housing developments in the outer parts of the UK, the southeast, places like that, because that's not really where we are. What we are doing is we are looking predominantly at zone 1, zone 2 sectors. But we're also looking at core Berlin, core Paris, core Milan. We are, doing a lot of stuff across Europe at the moment, but only in the best locations.
And is that because the capital demands that? Or is that because you see?
Because when things go wrong, it's a risk profile thing. When things go wrong, there's always a flight back to core. So if I'm going to do an office building, I'm going to do the best office building. I'm going to fund the best office building I can in that location. Because I know even if the market drops off, everyone's going to flood back to that.
And so as a business, you're utilising Invel's capital, who I think, got a slice in the top co as well, given it's 50-50 JV. But you've also got other pots of capital to do different types of deals as well.
Yeah, so we are, we've got multiple sources of capital who will come to us depending on which we can go to, depending on what deal it is we're doing.
Yeah.
Invel are our operating partner. They are part of our platform, but also are an option depending on the project.
So they're an operating partner?
Yeah, so they fund our platform. They are 50% owner in our platform.
Fine, okay, got it. So are you the operating partner and they're the LP?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're the LP, you guys are the operating partner, you'll find the deals, they'll fund it, and then you'll go and develop it out. And at the moment, there's 3 of you in the business?
4.
There's 4 of you?
Yeah, so we have myself, investment manager, and Andrea, who do the UK stuff.
Yep.
And then helping us, we also have another team that sits in Milan that do our European stuff.
Got it. Cool. Makes sense. And so at the moment you're actively out in the market looking for deals. Have you guys transacted on anything yet, or are you you gearing up to?
Yeah, we did something last year, which was a very good. We provided some pref equity, some people to close out some works that they were doing, and they needed a bit of extra equity. So that was fantastic. We've got a couple of deals at the moment that we're close to closing out.
Yep.
So we're very busy, but we're always looking for new stuff. So if people want to come and talk to us, come and have a chat with us. We are, we're here to see what we can do.
And in terms of the plans for the business, you looking at growing headcount through 2023, or is it going to be predicated on the deals that you do? What will be the kind of the kickers to kind of unlock that?
We're quite busy at the moment. It will come down to projects we take on. We've got our eyes on a couple of development projects that we want to do ourselves, which we're very keen on at the moment. It might come out this year. If they come off and they happen, you can see us growing our headcount a bit. But I think maybe 23, 24, watch your space. We will certainly be getting bigger and stronger.
Awesome. What, from your perspective, what are the key things that you need to get right when you're kind of assembling an external team?
That's a good question. You've got to be able to trust the people opposite you. So I think relationship with external team members is fundamental. You have enough to do with worrying that the consultant that you're employing is just trying to cover his own back and, worried. We're all pushing the envelope slightly, and I want to work with a consultant that I know who's going to get it right and is going to deliver what they say they're going to deliver. And if they say they're going to do something, they get it done, because that makes my life really easy. It means I don't have to worry about what they're doing. I know I haven't left anything on the table, because we're all, every project, in current climate, you have to stretch every bit of a project, costs, massing, you got to really pull at them, because projects are really tight at the moment. Funding costs are going up, which is why we're lending money, is a prime example of, the more pressures that are coming on each project. So you need to make sure you haven't left anything on the table and, fully exploited every opportunity. And I rely on my consultants to do that. And if they haven't done that, or they don't do that, then, it creates extra work for me, because I have to go back and question everything. So that's, for me, the fundamental part about a consultant. But, thankfully, most of the people I come across, as long as you explain where you're coming from, I think some consultants have a fear that, I'm going to get sued by the client if I get something slightly wrong. No, just be honest and open with us about, right, this is a bit of a stretch, but if we try it, maybe it might work, but it might not. If you're open and honest with us on that, that's our job to make the decision whether we're going to go for it or not.
Yeah.
It's not your job. You're not the director, so don't worry about it. Just give me the options. Let me know what there is. Be very clear about the ups and the downs about it, and then I can make a decision and move forward. Ultimately, that's why I'm there, to make decisions.
You kind of might have touched on it, but the last year or so, there's been a fair bit of inflation and cost inflation. How have you managed that as a development director, managing the cost inflation and some of the time lags as well on material?
Doing more design. I'm a firm believer that I do a lot of design work up front.
So what is that?
Well,
how does that impact?
So you talked about Reba stages at the start. Okay, you go from Reba stage 1, which is like a sketch on a pad, basically. Well, this might look good, to Reba stage 2 normally when you get planning. Then you've got stage 3 and 4. By the end of stage 4, you've got enough information that someone can tender it properly. What I try and do, and I've done on a lot of my projects, and this is a Frogmore specific thing that I learned very early on, was I try to get to at least Reba stage 3 before I start speaking to a contractor, because I want a contractor doesn't want to overprice something, but they're worried about the risk and they don't want to catch a cold. So giving them as much information as possible, getting your design to stage 4, is fundamental to locking down where your costs are, and then having enough lead-in time to make sure that if there is a delay, it can be accompanied in the project. That's why you have a good project manager.
And is that where you put in enough fat in terms of your appraisal to account for it?
No, because if you put in too much fat, you'll never buy the project. Right? So it's a balance. It's about understanding where your threads are that you can pull on in that project while still keeping it competitive.
And how, you touched on earlier the insurances and the protection. How do you deal with a situation where the contractor literally comes back to you and says, I know we agreed a one and done price, but my costs are out of control? Is it just on them and it's their, that's their kind of issue? They've signed the contract with you and, they've mispriced or misquoted? And
well, it comes down to a conversation at the end of the day. And it comes down to the issue with the delay that might be caused by having to switch contractors. I don't think people like to switch contractors very often. The delay is a lot more punitive than cost overrun might be. But there is always a discussion to be had, and you just work it out. It's like any negotiation. You need to work it out.
I know you sit as an external examiner at the Royal Agricultural University, almost going back full circle, and you provide guidance and support to the master's students there. What advice do you give them, or what advice would you give to someone who wants to enter into the world of real estate? Because you've had a very varied and interesting route through estate agency, through data and analytics, through the kind of the development pathway that you've had so far. What advice would you give to someone who wants to get into the space right now?
So a lot of the students, when I get a chance, I don't get to speak to them very often. Partially that's because as an external examiner, I have to keep myself one step away. But whenever we get to speak to them as a group, the one thing I always impress on them is real estate's a lot different now to what it was 20 years ago. It's a lot more professional. It's, you need to be on the top of your game, your maths, your English, all those factors. Okay. Think about, doing extra lessons so that your Excel is really competent. A lot of the models we're dealing with now, you've got, investment guys who have been to Harvard and done, investment finance or something like that, and are coming into the business, into the sector. So if you want to have a long career, you need to think about how the money that drives everything works in the sector, and having a really fundamental understanding about that, I think, is most probably the safest way to have a really long-standing career. Because I am seeing a lot of older people in the business now. It's hard if you can't work Excel, if you don't know what cash flows, or you don't have an understanding of that fundamental point, right? Even office leasing guys are understanding the cash flow implications of the decisions they're making. They're expecting you to be able to advise, and so you need to understand the things that are their push and pull factors. So that's a big thing that I say to a lot of the students is go and learn how to use Excel properly. Read books on finance and how that works, because that's what drives it.
Learn how to structure deals, or off the back of that, you'll learn how to structure deals or put deals together?
Off the back of that, no, because off the back of that, you will learn what the things that cause angst within people's minds about the type of, when they get into a deal. Every deal is going to be slightly different, and you've got to be a bit kind of loose about how the structuring works, because no two deals are the same. Especially in the development world, there's always something that's an issue. So, but understanding the worries will then lead you into structuring deals, and the best kind of learning for structuring deals is by doing them and having exposure to them.
Yeah, awesome. Well, look, as we draw to a close, Michael, a question I ask everyone who joins me on the podcast is: if you were given £500 million worth of equity, who are the people, what property, and which place would you look to deploy that cash?
I'd do what I'm doing now. 100%. I would look to find the best assets in the best locations. And I'll be honest, 500 million is not that much anymore.
Well, I was originally going to start with 100 million quid, but given the way at which inflation's biting, I was like, I'm going to move that to 500 million.
500 million might be one project. If you're talking one 300,000 square foot office building in central London, you could be at 500 million. It's just crazy how the numbers have ballooned, certainly in my lifetime that I've worked in the industry. So I'd look to diversify that 500 million into different, taking pieces in different pots. So that's how I would do it. But I'd always look at core assets. I like prime core assets. They're a bit more expensive to get into, but they tend to be a bit more stable when there's a rock to the economy or to the sector. People always want to be in the best building. That doesn't change.
And so what would you take something from like a value add or development angle to core, and that would be your exit?
Possibly, yeah. That's maybe take something that can be knocked down and doubled in size or something.
Would it be an office focused scheme, or would it be mixed use by nature?
I like mixed use.
Because?
I think because with mixed use, you can make your equity work better for you. If you've got an element of residential into your office scheme, you're creating a great environment, firstly, to start off with. That's the fundamental. So people will want to be there because you'll have, the right kind of retail, you have really cool kind of plazas and areas around a mixed-use development. Then you can stitch in a hotel, which you can either forward fund or do some kind of management agreement in. So that will allow you to de-risk that part of your your asset, and then you can maybe you do PRS instead of doing a for sale product, or maybe you do a for sale product. But the way you look at it is you can start selling those things off prior to completion of the project. Maybe you can sell the hotel off early during construction, and then that allows you to reuse, makes your equity more efficient in your project. And then the office offices make great returns, but there's a lot of risk involved in them. And they take a bit longer, and you can't get funding to do most of them. That's why mixed use development I love, because certain parts can be funded in different ways, and it becomes a bit like baking a cake. Different components come in. Some bits are really expensive, and some bits are really cheap. But
put it together and create an awesome project. So, Place Central London project, or property mixed use.
Yeah.
Who are the people from your career that you'd want on board?
People from my career that I like. Well, I think Andrea is a guy that I would definitely want on board, because if he can fund it, he would definitely make that 500 million into 1.5 billion. So it will give us a bit more to do. Adrian Bunnis is most probably one of the best development people I've ever come across. He was my mentor when I was at CBRE, so I think he's now chairman of Greycoat. So he's doing what he's supposed to be doing. I'd have someone like Henry Robinson kind of making sure it's delivered and built in the right way. But I think they're the types of people that I'd be bringing on board. Awesome.
Well, look, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing a little bit about your background, route and moves within real estate, and also what you and the team at Areli Living, soon to be rebranded with a new name.
Watch your space.
Coming to the market soon. So thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciated that.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the People, Property, Place podcast. If you found it insightful, feel free to share it with a friend or colleague, subscribe, give us a rating, like or comment. It helps tremendously. It'd be great to hear from you on LinkedIn. I'm super open-minded to recommendations of which guests you think we should get on the podcast, or areas of the market that we should explore further. So do drop me a message. The People, Property, Place podcast is powered by Rockborn. The team recruit experienced talent for real estate private equity firms, investment managers, REITs, property companies and advisory firms across the investment, asset management, development, fund management, ESG, cap markets, investor relations and general practice space. So if you're considering your career options at the moment or looking to attract top talent to come and work for you, head over to the website www.rockborn.com, where you can find a wealth of resource to aid your search. Have a great day wherever you are, and I look forward to catching you next time.